This is Truth in Media. I'm Ben Swan. They may be the most vilified doctors in the country or the most heroic. Two doctors from Bakersfield, California, who stood up just a week ago and declared that the coronavirus numbers, the data they were looking at, was not what we were being told. This is
0.1% chance of death. Widespread, small amount of deaths. It's similar to flu.
Millions of people saw that news conference. But since then, YouTube has taken it down, and so-called health experts have attacked these two doctors, saying the methodology they used was completely flawed. The question is, was it?
So if they talk about data being inaccurate, let's look at the predictive models. They weren't even in the ballpark of what's possible. We're at 60,000 deaths right now. They were predicting 2 million. And if we want to talk about science, I would quote the great state epidemiologist, Dr. Giesecke out of Sweden, who said there is little or actually no evidence to sheltering in place.
New information you're not going to hear anywhere else. Today in my exclusive interview with Dr. Dan Erickson, right here, right now, on Truth in Media. Well, thanks for tuning in. By now, you've seen the video of those two doctors from Bakersfield, California, talking about the coronavirus numbers that they've seen in their community after conducting thousands of tests.
So we're seeing millions of cases, small amount of death. Millions of cases, small amount of death.
If you haven't seen the video, well, good luck finding it, because YouTube took it down, and there's been a huge battle over whether or not this is legitimate science. Here's the problem. Immediately after this news conference, so-called journalists, and we use that term loosely, began writing articles essentially trashing these two doctors from Bakersfield, saying that their methodology was completely wrong. Let me read this to you. Public health experts were quick to debunk the doctors' findings as misguided and riddled with statistical errors, and an example of the kind of misleading information they are forced to waste precious time disputing. The doctors should have never assumed the patients they tested who came in for walk-in COVID-19 tests or who sought urgent care for symptoms they experienced in the middle of a pandemic are representative of the general population, said Dr. Carl Bergstrom, a University of Washington biologist who specializes in infectious disease modeling. And most credible studies of COVID-19 death rates are far higher than the ones the doctors presented. Here's the problem with this so-called article from a so-called journalist. What COVID studies are you citing? Where's the data? We don't see it. We see health experts and public health experts. Name them, but they're not named in these articles. In fact, the only name is Dr. Carl Bergstrom, who does in fact work for the University of Washington. And here's the other reality. Dr. Bergstrom did not bother to actually look at any of the data presented by Dr. Erickson. Not one bit of it. Never asked to see it. Did not analyze the data for himself. But the question, even without looking at the data, is Dr. Bergstrom right? Was this a improperly collected type of data? And jumping off right at that point, let's bring in our guest, Dr. Dan Erickson, talking to us over Skype. He is an emergency physician and the COO and co-owner of Accelerated Urgent Care. And Dr. Erickson, glad to have you here with us to clear up a lot of this. So the number one so-called complaint that I've seen that essentially tries to call this news conference, junk science, and these guys don't know what they're doing, is this claim that only people coming through the doors of your clinic who had symptoms were being tested. But that is flatly untrue, correct?
No, that's highly untrue. Actually, a lot of people now over the last month, if they have a grandmother at home, if they have an immunocompromised child, all kinds of people are coming in with no symptoms. And here's the bottom line of the data. The local media in Kern County said, can you give us some idea of how many you've tested and the positives? I said, sure. Here's my raw data. At the time, I had checked 5,200 people and 340 positives. I said about 6.5% of my people are positive. Now I've checked over 6,000. About 7.3% of all the people we've tested is positive. Initially, it was not randomized, and I should have made that more clear. This is a raw data dump to have a transparent process where the local media could say, oh, he's testing thousands, this many are positive, and get some idea of how prevalent this thing was. That was the whole point of the data. I'm not an epidemiologist. I was just trying to have transparent data.
Well, and transparency is a big part of this, right? Because obviously, One thing you said in the news conference, which is important that people distinguish also, because I saw the reporters who were kind of aggressive in the way they were asking you, like, so you think you know more than Dr. Fauci does? But the reality is that Fauci and a lot of the so-called health experts here are basing numbers on modeling and not on data. In fact, I haven't seen a single counter, even as of today, a single counter to your news conference that contradicts your data with data. Does that even exist out there?
Well, let's look at the original predictive models of 2 million people dying in the United States. So if they talk about data being inaccurate, let's look at the predictive models. They weren't even in the ballpark of what's possible. We're at 60,000 deaths right now. They were predicting 2 million. And if we want to talk about science, I would quote the great state epidemiologist, Dr. Giesecke out of Sweden, who said there is little or actually no evidence to sheltering in place. There is little to no evidence of social distancing. So if you're going to put an economy in complete lockdown, we need to make sure we have some good science. Because like the great Dr. Giesecke said, you can put people in lockdown and shut down an economy. We've never done this before. How are you going to bring them out? So you would think you'd have a plan with good science. If you're going to lock down an economy and take away people's income and put them into anxiety and depression, it seems to me you'd have a rational plan of going into it and a rational exit strategy, and you would show this to the public. We didn't get such a thing. All we got was predictive models that said 2 million Americans are going to die.
And they said even with social distancing in place, a minimum of 240,000 people would die. And obviously we're way off from those numbers. One more question about the actual testing. Is it true, without going into great detail, because I know there's some sensitivity here, but is it true that you guys have also tested on behalf of employers, of employees, and those were also randomized tests?
Yeah, true. So the employer would, let's say he had a shipping department, and he had one person with a fever. He would send over 300 employees, and we would test all of them. Most of them had no symptoms. I saw some of the patients. I said, why are you coming in? Oh, my boss asked me to. So we tested hundreds of people that had no symptoms at all. It was just randomly coming in for testing.
And so those who have made these claims, and again, there's been such, I would call it hack journalism. It's not even journalism. It's these hit pieces that have been written about you. And you go and you see it's the exact same story that's getting repeated everywhere. There's a very clear effort to attack the news conference you had. But has anyone associated with either news publications who have attacked you, or the University of Washington and this guy from the University of Washington who took shots at the methodology, has anyone asked to see your data? Has anyone said, let me see what you're doing so that I can critique it or criticize it?
Again, our data is raw data. It's amount of tests and positive numbers. Let me just add this. The Stanford study that was done with extreme care and scientifically appropriate analysis, we talked to the gentleman who did that. He said, I've never been so vilified in my life. This is one of the chief researchers at Stanford. And I'm going, I think they're attacking for different reasons, because his science, mine is just data. Again, let's be clear. We were not trying to do a biostatistical analysis on this. We were just giving raw data at a moment in time. The PCR nasopharyngeal swab is a moment in time that says yes or no. This is not an IgG, immunoglobulin test that shows immunity. This is a moment in time that says yes or no. We have 340 cases out of 5,200 at the time, and it's 6.5% of everybody we test. It was a basic data drop because the local stations asked us for it, and we weren't saying this is an accurate predictive model. We know exactly what's going on. That was not the point of it. And if people got that, I want to clarify. It was raw data because the media asked us to be transparent in our reporting.
But the raw data, and I appreciate what you're saying there, but the raw data that you supplied and the numbers that you were looking with and dealing with matches almost exactly what Germany found when they did their raw data study and essentially said, we have done mass testing in Germany, because Germany was very vigilant in going out and testing its population randomly. And they also came up with a number, which was 0.03% of the population. That's what they came up with in Germany as the mortality rate. And so I think it's very interesting, as I went back and listened to your conference and I went back and read the Germany report, they both came back with the same number. And then I noticed the way that media was spinning the Germany situation, saying that there is some kind of exception that's been made for Germany, and somehow Germans are less likely to die from this, which is nonsense. It's just that Germany tested, similar to what we're seeing right now in Sweden, where they did not have a lockdown, and yet their mortality numbers are pretty much in line with everyone else.